Hi, my name is Sam and welcome to Cars Performance Garage. Today I'm going to give you a review on my 60 litre Supercheap auto parts washer, and I'm finally going to put it on wheels. So this is a quick overview of the Supercheap Auto 60 litre parts washer. It costs $199.99 and can be bought from Supercheap Auto stores. It comes with the tub, legs, pump, filter, cleaning shelf and cleaning basket. The tub holds 60 litres of cleaning liquid and the pump's flow rate is 3 litres per minute. Some dimensions and other specifications are that it's 87 centimetres tall by 76 centimetres wide and 54 centimetres deep. It has a 2 metre power cable and the drain plug head size is 17 millimeters. Some other features is that it has a small shelf underneath the tub so you can store part washer related items or anything else you really want. A changeable filter and a bendable water hose so you can point the detergent in any place you please. As you can see, the part washing liquid is absolutely filthy. So because it's easier to lift when it's drained, I'm going to replace all the liquid anyway. To help drain it out easier, I'm going to leave it on for a little while and let it all mix in, so hopefully when I drain it, all the big clumps and everything should hopefully get dissolved and it will drain much easier. But in the meantime, let's design and fabricate the base that this is going to wheel around on. For the base of the parts washer, I decided to use a similar design that I used when I built the base for my blasting cabinet. It is basically just a rectangle with some little pieces on the inside / the outside to help support it and keep it on the frame. So I measured everything up, jotted it down onto some graph paper, and these are the measurements and plan I got. So the plan is I measured out the base and then I measured out the tube. So I want the parts washer sitting in the middle of the tubing so it's got the maximum support. The tube is 25 millimeters squared, so I just added 25 millimeters onto each end, giving me some sections of 470 millimeters across and then 725 millimeters long. Now, of course, if I was to cut the metal, I'd have to do a 45-degree angle on each corner to ensure that it's the same length. But I just got to do some calculations so I can get the right length for 4 pieces of metal that I can weld together and put this bad boy on. So after a little bit of quick maths, this is what I finally got. So after that very quick bit of math, I need 2 lengths of 725mm and 2 lengths of 420mm. So I can now measure it out and cut it. The materials I am using is some 1.6mm thick 25mm squared steel square tubing, some 2mm thick 30mm wide steel bar, and 4 125mm 150 kilo rated rubber casters, 2 of which have wheel locks on them, so it means that I can lock the parts washer in place so it won't move. Now that I had all of my materials, I measured up all the steel tube, then got the cold saw out and cut all the steel. After cutting all the steel, I got all the pieces, laid them on the ground and double checked their measurements. One of my pieces I knew was going to be a little bit long, so I made sure what piece it was, marked how much I needed to get rid of, and then I just went over to my belt sander and sanded it to size. I also quickly got all the other rods and just quickly sanded off all the burrs. I then put them back on the floor, triple checked that all the measurements were 100% and marked what corners on each of the steel tubing needed to be ground down as they were going to be the weld seams. After I marked what edges needed to be ground down, I started grinding those edges in preparation for welding. After all the edges were beveled, I then got my die grinder out with a sandpaper disc and continued to prep the metal a little bit more. After all the metal was prepped, I got my welding squares out, I turned on my welder, adjusted the settings, and tacked all the pieces together. Now I'm not a professional welder by any means, and this next clip will definitely show you why I need to work on my welding skills. So back out comes the grinder. So I had to grind down all my old spot welds, and then I could re-weld it all together. This time I held the spot weld in place for longer, so it penetrated a lot better. So after it was all back welded together, it was strong enough, I could put it onto the stand so it was more comfortable welding the rest of it. Now that all the welding was done, it was time to grind the welds flat, and this was the result that I got. Now that the frame was assembled, it was time to check back on the parts washer. So now it's time to empty the parts washer. This is the part I'm not excited for because I'm fully expecting this whole floor to be absolutely drenched, but hopefully I can pull it off with minimal spills. There is a drain plug underneath this parts washer, so all you need is a 17mm spanner or socket so you can loosen the bolt and drain it all out. I just put a bucket underneath the drain hole, then I just tipped whatever the contents were in that bucket into some containers to be disposed of correctly. And of course, in my typical fashion, I had to make a mess as well. Once enough liquid was drained out so it wasn't touching the shelf, I just got a spray bottle with some degreaser, quickly gave it a spray and a quick little wash, and put it aside. I also degreased and washed the cleaning basket so that was all clean, and I put it all aside. Once everything was out of the parts washer, I also degreased the sides and gave it a bit of a scrub to help get everything nice and clean so it wouldn't contaminate my new degreaser. After most of the old liquid had drained out, I removed the pump, gave a quick clean behind the pump, got the filter out, cleaned all that kind of stuff, and also gave inside the pump a little clean. Also just got some more water and just rinsed everything out. While I was cleaning out the very bottom, one thing that I did discover was all of this sludge. It kind of looked like algae, so I'm pretty sure that's what it was, but that's kind of expected considering I've had this liquid in this parts washer for well over a year. I definitely should have changed it sooner, but I was waiting for the time when I should build a frame, and I finally got around to it. At the bottom of the parts washer, I also found a lost cleaning brush, so that was a bonus as well. Now that the parts washer is empty, a little bit cleaner, and the frame is done, it was time to test fit it onto the frame. So I lifted it up and it fitted really well. So to ensure the parts washer doesn't fall off the frame, I'm going to weld a little bit of steel bar just on the inside so it means that it can't fall off. But now it's just attaching the wheels, putting the bars in, and it'll be done. So for these little bars, I think I'll just make it 2.5 centimeters for each one. It will be high enough, it doesn't have to be too high, just as long as it means the parts washer can't fall off. So before I weld this up, I cut these little support pieces off camera as it's getting late here and cutting metal is a lot louder than welding it or grinding it. So I'm just going to mark out where I need to quickly grind off the paint, so then I can continue welding, and then it's on to painting. So when I was welding the little bars onto the frame so the parts washer would stay onto the frame, I was pretty careful not to warp any of the metal. I was even more careful when welding the wheels onto the frame because they do have these rubber bushings and they do have grease in it, and if they get too hot, all that grease and the rubber can burn off, and so the wheel won't spin as freely as it should. Now that the base is all done and the wheels are on, I could finally test fit the parts washer. I did have to loosen the legs a little bit to get it on, as it does fit really snug, but because it is really snug, it's extremely secure. To give the base a final touch, I used some red engine enamel and gave it a good paint job. It was really cold outside and the paint was going to take ages to dry, so I kind of just laid it on kind of thick, but as you can see, it's not exactly the best paint job in the world. It is just a base for a parts washer, so I painted it enough so the welds would be protected. Now that the base is painted and ready, I gave the parts washer one final little rinse and clean. I filled it up just with some tap water. I got a variety of detergents out and put them in so the parts washer could have a good soak, and I could put all the brushes and the basket and the shelf in so they could also get a good soak and a clean, ready for the new liquid. So now it's time to clean the inside. I'm not sure what the best chemical would be to clean this whole thing to try and get as much of the grease and grot off the sides, especially. So I picked up a few things. So in this concoction today, got some dishwashing tablets, some good old palm olive dish soap, washing machine detergent, and to finish it off, because it's COVID, hospital grade disinfectant, and it smells like lavender. That should be enough. Let's turn this on and see what happens. Right, so I'm going to stop it here and start draining it. Honestly, the water's looking pretty dark, but I think that's mainly just cleaned all my brushes and my scrubbing equipment. I gave the edges of the parts washer a quick scrub, and honestly, it came out a lot better than expected. I think for next time, definitely would have used hot or boiling water to help break down the grease. But in general, it's done a pretty good job. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to drain it, but I'll do it off camera as it's pretty dark and late. And then I'll let it dry overnight, and tomorrow we'll put it on its base. So a few weeks have passed now, and due to the new mezzanine in the shed, I've not had a chance to finish off the parts washer and the parts washer stand. So from last time, I believe you saw I filled it up with some water and different bits of detergents. Luckily, it worked really well. It actually got a lot of especially the thicker grease and the more gritty, grimy stuff out. So I emptied it and I flushed with water. So now I'm going to have a look at the filter, give that a good rinse out, and once that's rinsed, put it back in, plug it up, and onto the frame. As I left the parts washer empty overnight, a lot of water had drained from the brushes and everywhere else, so it collected in the bottom. So I made sure I removed all the water from the bottom, I removed the filter, and I just washed the filter by using some clean water, rinsing it and squeezing it. I did that a few times and the filter came out pretty good. Right, so I'm going to put that dirty bit at the top, I'll put it at the top because I presume it was the bottom that had the sediment. There we are. The filter change is that easy. So let's get the stand and let's see if it fits. Alright. Got my stand. Position it the right way as I want the locking wheels at the front. Now in theory, this should fit on top nicely, but we'll see how it goes. What would be a good idea is to lock these first so it stops moving around. Because it's been sitting around underneath sawdust, I've just got some soapy water and I'll just give the whole thing a clean so it looks kind of presentable. With the parts washer all clean and on its base, it was finally time to move it into position. And there we are. It's now in place, ready to fill. Alright, so I'm going to fill it up with this stuff, this Chemtech. I was reading some reviews and apparently this is not too bad, but the first thing we got to look is the mixture. So if you have a look, heavy degreasing, yeah, it's like 10 to 1. So let's just use 10 to 1. Let's give it a go. Because I'm a man of precision, I'm going to just guesstimate a litre. So, it's got markings 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'll do it down to there. And too much, but who cares? It's just a bit of extra degreasing power. So to fill this up, I'm just going to use my watering can and I'm just going to use regular water. I want to test something. I'm going to have a look at the state of the degreaser after a little bit, after I've used just normal water. And in the future, I'm going to try some demineralized water and some boiled water to see what works the best over time and also what's the cheapest, of course. So let's start filling. So at the moment I don't have too much to degrease, but I've got this intercooler bracket. It's got a bit of grime and grit. So let's chuck this in and give it a whirl. And boom, especially our bottom section, barely any more grease or grime. So this would be absolutely perfect to chuck into the blasting cabinet. Give it a blast and it'll become so nice and shiny. So now that the parts washer is on its base, I can now finally call it workshop ready. The main reasons why I built a base for it was so I can move it around into any position that's convenient in the shed. Plus also with where I usually have it stored now, I need to move it so I can access equipment that's underneath the stairs. Also, I found that its original floor standing height is a little bit too short. I'm 180 centimeters tall, and with its original floor standing height, was a little bit too short. So when using it for an extended period of time, I would have to bend over, and over time, my back would start to tire. Now for my review / final thoughts. $200, honestly, this is actually a really good deal. Sure, I could go on eBay, Amazon, or somewhere else online and pick up a similar quality priced item for like $20 to $50 less. But because I did buy it from Supercheap Auto, it means if I do have any sort of problems with it, I can just walk in store and get the issue dealt with in person. One thing that I did forget to add is it doesn't come with any brushes. So you will need to go out and buy some brushes yourself. Personally, I've got a collection of lots of different brushes, everything from just like an actual specific car cleaning brush to toilet brushes, different scrubbers, and of course the good old handy toothbrush. A lot of these brushes can be found for really cheap, so I recommend getting a good selection of a whole bunch of different size brushes and different shape brushes so you can get into any little tight corners in any of the parts you have. The pump and the washer itself has been absolutely flawless for the year and a bit that I've owned it. Even considering I hadn't changed the degreaser in here since I got it until now, the pump just kept chugging along no matter what I threw at it. The filter is replaceable, but Supercheap Auto doesn't sell a direct replacement. But as it's just a flat sheet of cloth, I'm sure a DIY filter could be made for pretty cheap and pretty easily. The construction is solid and it's actually really easy to put together as it provides some pretty decent quality bolts, as it just uses a Phillips head bolt and a 10mm nut with some washers. It doesn't really flex that much, but it would be really nice if it was a bit taller in its floor standing height. The cleaning shelf inside is extremely useful because it means that I can just put parts on top, give it a good scrub, and they won't sink to the bottom where I'll lose it forever. Plus, the soaking basket that's also included is great to put like lots of little items like bolts to give it a really good soak before I can finally give it a scrub. One drawback is when emptying it. It uses a drain bolt, which is not too much of an issue, but it would be really nice if it used a tap instead. That's not too much of a worry, as it's a standard M14 by 1.5mm thread, so there's plenty of other solutions out there that I could just DIY myself. And next time I empty this liquid, I'm definitely going to install a tap, as I can just drain it straight into a container that will then be disposed of correctly. I'm very glad that I bought this, as it removed the need for just having a random container that I would have to fill with degreaser, then empty afterwards and dispose of it, because you can't really just store it in an open container. Plus, pretty much every container I've ever used, it would just break because of how heavy the parts are, or an edge just lands in the wrong spot and it cracks and it just makes a huge mess and turns into a really, really bad time. I would definitely say that using a container would be perfectly fine for someone who just has, you know, the 1 or 2 project cars and does the occasional weekend work. But for someone like myself who does a lot more engine work on a more regular basis, it definitely has been a life and a money saver. Definitely recommend this Supercheap Auto parts washer for the more serious weekend mechanic. For a workshop that would use it every day, I wouldn't get it, as direct replacement parts are hard to get. I don't think the filter system is extensive enough to protect the pump for an extensive period of time. So this has been my review / frame build for the Supercheap Auto 60 litre parts washer. I would definitely do this small little upgrade to anyone who buys one. It's relatively cheap. It cost me about $150 in supplies, and I've got some material left over. I'm sure you could do it for cheaper, but the biggest cost of it is definitely the casters. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a like. If you're enjoying my content so far, please consider subscribing and check out some of my other videos. As always, you can follow me on Instagram at 07carves, and until next time, have a great day.